We talked with Ryan Day for the second time in 48 hours, and we're going to make it 4 times in 96 hours on Wednesday. But Tuesday was all about Ohio State versus Indiana. Signing day is later this week, and we'll talk to him about that. So Tuesday was all about the actual football team as they try to win their first Big Ten title since 2020. This will also be the 6th time they've won the Big Ten championship game. They are 5-1 in that game. That's the most anybody's ever been there. And this will be their 40th Big Ten championship overall. I'm Steven, that's Andrew, and that's Stefan. Andrew, I want to start with you. What is the most interesting thing you took from Ryan Day's, 30-minute press conference?
There's a lot about Indiana. Am I allowed to start with the technology at Michigan?
I would shame on you. I would actually have taken the mic and gone to Stefan if you didn't.
Yeah, so basically Ryan Day, backing up a little bit, if you're unaware, Ohio State's comms went out against Michigan. So that's helmet-to-helmet communication. That's communication like Julian Sayin, cracked it. He's like, I haven't done it since high school, but I had to run to the sideline to get the play. And that's very old school. That's high school football, right? That's typically teams have a plan for that. Today, Ryan Day said that he had an inkling that would happen and that he thought it was important that they would have a plan. So there was a quote, there was that question, and everybody just kind of went, that's kind of interesting. And then the next question, or a question right after that, was, why did you have an inkling that was going to happen? And he said, well, I mentioned it to our assistants on Thursday or Friday and said hey, we should have a plan for this. And they were kind of looking at me like I was nuts, which kind of tells me that they didn't have that plan for Illinois. They didn't have that plan for a home game. They didn't have that plan for at Washington. They had that plan for Michigan. And then he said, they kind of looked at me like I was nuts. And I said, you just got to be prepared. Fortunately, we had a plan, because you never know. And it's funny how the mind works. And then he winked at the reporters that asked the question. And I thought that for as much as Ryan Day has talked about winning with humility and winning with all that stuff, and I think they have to most degrees, there's been a couple of, flare-ups here and there. Somebody tried to plant the flag. Jeremiah Smith flipped off the crowd. I get all that. But, for the most part, Ohio State has handled themselves, I think, as Ryan Day wanted them to. I think this was Ryan Day's moment to be we know what Michigan is. I think that's what he was saying in that moment of, we know kind of what goes on in Ann Arbor, and this is how we think of Michigan, not just in the we hate them, we won't even say their name type of way. I think that was kind of his dig at Michigan to say, we know what's going on. And we were talking before, there's been a lot of stuff about, Michigan protecting the M and, the tunnel and all the fighting stuff. And I think that was just Ryan Day's way of saying, funky stuff happens when you go to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we were well prepared for something crazy to go off the wall like it did. And I think he was trying to illustrate that to us of just, hey, we were ready for it because we knew that there was going to be some shenanigans. And, I think I joked to you guys before, that wink that Ryan Day gave, it's going to go triple platinum on Twitter because I think it was pretty illuminating.
So I'm sure this is where you're going to go. I thought it came this way first, so I guess we can further this conversation a little bit more. They got asked about the idea of, did he want to flip the tenor of the rivalry? And that's just not flipping in terms of we've been losing and now we want to win this rivalry. But the way Ohio State handled themselves during the game, post-game, and listen, emotions fly sometimes, right? Davis Igbenogson getting a pick and taking his helmet off, it's whatever. Ryan Day said, it's fine. We ran an extra sprint, but it's fine. It's fine. And obviously players have been posting on social media and doing all that and carrying on. But the dude at the top, that's the voice who matters most, every time he's been in front of a microphone, has handled it humbly. And that's what really matters here. What he's saying behind closed doors clearly isn't any of our business because it's behind closed doors. But there is a polar opposite way of really the last 2 years how Ohio State has handled winning and losing versus the way Michigan has handled winning and losing, which is ironic given the fact that last year a Michigan player was saying that this team needs to learn how to lose. By the way they handled that, is there anything to take from that isn't just about football, but just about the culture of where this rivalry is and where these two teams are when it comes to how people view them?
Yeah, I think Ryan Day has done a good job of not devaluing the rivalry, right? They've kept it as one of the 3 goals and one of the most important things, and you could tell by the way they played that game, meant a ton to them. But you can't lose and say, okay, well, we lost the rivalry, but move on. There's more to play for. And then when you win, be see, we're better than you, blah blah blah. And then they've done the same thing where it's okay, that game's over, and now you move on to what's ahead and the other goals that you have at hand. And if that's how you approach losing it, that's how you have to approach winning it as well. So I think that they've done that. I think Ohio State's done a good job of, putting some context around what the game means with also the goals that you can still accomplish over the course of a season. And I think the most maybe interesting thing that came from this is, whether it be the Urban Meyer era, and obviously that came with success against Michigan. So the way that Urban handled it was not wrong, right? He knew how to approach it that way. And I think what we've seen, with Michigan under Harbaugh and Sharon Moore when they've won is that this rivalry has been fueled on both sides by hating the other team. And I think Sonny Styles, one of the first things he said when he talked to us, and that was even before we, talked to Ryan Day post-game Saturday, was we played for the love of each other as opposed to, the hate of the other team. And I know that sounds, tacky and cliche and something that would be like on a Hobby Lobby poster, but it's something that this team has bought into, right? And I think that's the way they celebrated kind of reflected that, right? Like Ohio State's players were in the stands with Ohio State fans, right? And we saw, Tim Walton and Jermaine Matthews hugging each other coming up the tunnel, and the way they celebrated was very much like we are happy about what's going on in our circle and not worried about going into another circle and kind of making it into something that it's not. So I think last year the way they handled the loss flipped the tenor of the rivalry a bit, but you couldn't necessarily say that because you just lost. But the way you handle yourself in winning, I think, kind of goes a long way and says that you weren't lying about, you weren't being sore losers and coping last year. That's genuinely how you approach it, and I think you saw that in how they won.
I think you exposed Michigan as a front runner. Because it was all cool when you were winning to go plant a flag and talk crazy, and Derek Moore in Las Vegas saying this and saying that and tweeting out nobody cares after the game. That's when the national championship game was over. All that stuff was cool, right, when you were the one doing it. And then all of a sudden, when it's on the other side, you think it's disrespectful to do those things in your guard and your flag. All these things that Ohio State, quite frankly, Gillis is right. There were a couple players who were trying to plant a flag, and it was all of like
Ryan
Canada.
Day said no, but Ryan to that point, like Will Kazmarek had the flag, and Ryan Day was like, no, go back. Like Ryan Day did have a handle on that, and he did put the lid on that pretty quick.
And that's his job, right? He's in charge of things. Will Kazmarek is an Ohio guy, and Davis Igbenogson, I think most people had on their ballot of, hey, who's going to plant a flag? And even to the point that, yes, Jermaine Matthews was hugging Tim Walton coming up the ramp after the game. And Tim Walton, by the way, got his first win in the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. He was 0-4 as a player and 0-3 as a coach before Saturday. With that being said, he was also screaming out coming up the tunnel, we are definitely going back-to-back. We're going back-to-back. And Justin Terry said the same thing. So their competitive juice was still flowing after the game. Yeah. But I do think from a big picture standpoint, there seemed to be a viewpoint right now of there's a way to do things with class and still respect the rivalry. And for a team to come in Ohio Stadium, win the game, and then act the way they acted, and then find it appalling that someone else might do that, says more, I think, about Michigan than it does about Ohio State. And that goes to the fights in the tunnel that happened before the game. That goes into whether they had an impact on the comms or whether it was just snowing and the comms got wet, still technology, who knows. But it's just when you've developed this reputation as this, I don't want to say dirty because dirty is a little bit too far, but you just do sketchy stuff. This is what happens, especially when Ryan Day handles things a little bit differently. Stefan, what else did you take?
There's a football game on Saturday that hasn't been played yet. Number 2 versus number 1. Number 1 versus number 2 in Indianapolis playing for a trophy. The Big Ten Championship game, I think, is something that a lot of people in this building are excited about, right? I think in the context of college football, conference championships have become a topic of conversation in terms of their importance, especially in a situation like this where win or lose is not going to have too much of an impact on the seeding of where Indiana and Ohio State are. Obviously, the winner is going to be the 1 seed. Loser's probably going to be 2, 3. Maybe they drop to number 4 if it's some kind of blowout or, either way. But this team cares a lot about that, right? There's 3 goals every year of winning the Gold Pants, winning the Big Ten, winning the national championship. And when you look at guys like Caden Curry and Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith, guys who were a part of last year's roster, they won a national championship, but there was not like asterisk isn't the right word, but there was kind of a level of like, okay, there's still more on the table, right? It's not we won a national championship, we've accomplished everything we could possibly want to accomplish at Ohio State. There is more to it, and I think this team is treating it that way. And I think the way Ryan Day talks about Indiana and talks about this game is that they do have a level of respect for their opponent, and they understand the magnitude of what this matchup is going to be, right? Night game in Indianapolis, the whole world's going to be watching number 1 versus number 2, except for College Game Day. They're going to the SEC championships. But I think that there there is a level of importance, level of importance to this game that's evident in the way, Ryan Day's talking about Indiana's RPO offense and how difficult that can be to slow down, and how important, Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles and their kind of, vision and being able to read what's going on, how important that is. And, the veteran aspect of, and the experience and the leadership that Fernando Mendoza has. No quarterback that Ohio State has played this year has that, right? Bryce Underwood was a true freshman. Damon Williams was a young guy. Arch Manning was still young relative to this point. To this point, you could say Arch is pretty experienced, right? Because he's been in college a few years now when he started a full season's, worth of games. Whereas at week one, that's not what he was, right? He had one career start, two career starts, whatever it was, going into the season in that matchup against Texas. So Ryan has a lot of respect for Fernando Mendoza. You heard that Sunday when we talked to him via Zoom for the Big Ten press conference. Now Tuesday, when we talked to him here, that Ohio State, that we talked about this on our two big things, right? It was like, what were the vibes going to be in coming off an emotional high of that win, and how you handle this week. And it's been a very business-like, professional approach. Again, we say that a lot with Ohio State, but that's kind of how they're viewing this game. And Luke Montgomery had said Monday that, they're in you must win mode every game now, right? And that's not technically true with this Big Ten championship game, but in terms of winning the Big Ten, this is a must-win game, right? You can't go through a run in the playoff and say that you won the Big Ten. So it's an important game, and I think Ohio State's treating it as such. And I think if you're a fan or a reporter or whatever, like, you enjoy hearing that, because what's the point of having a game where people are paying $400 to get in if the teams aren't going to compete, right? The get-in price was like $350.
It's like $600 now.
Well, it's getting pricier and pricier. So, this game should matter. I think Ohio State's treating it as such, and I think guys like Caden Curry are kind of the, obviously for Caden Curry it means a little bit more. He played 3 state title games at Lucas Oil Stadium. Like, it's his home state. He wants to go back. He was recruited by Indiana. Like, there's a lot to it. But he's one of those guys that's like, we just watched a senior class leave last year with no gold pants and no Big Ten title. And I don't think they want another senior class to do that. Sure, they got the gold pants, but, you want to leave with the Big Ten title too. And I think that's exciting if you're a fan or someone either watching or attending this game, because you see that Ohio State's up for it. And I think it's no doubt on the other side that Indiana is as well.
Are the Colts at home the next day?
No, they can't be. I would assume not.
No, they were home last Sunday.
Okay. I mean, it's not that hard. It's just turf.
They're in Jacksonville.
Okay, yeah, it's just turf. You can just rip it up and put the next one down. They don't have to play at 1. They can play at like 8 o'clock at night. Who knows? So, Andrew, Cignetti was getting a bunch of questions on Sunday when we talked with him about the idea of like what last year's game did to his program, in terms of, he called it necessary. He admitted that it was that game and the Notre Dame game were maybe a little too big of a moments for Indiana, and that he admitted Ohio State dominated last year's game, but it's also the reason why they were ready when they got on the field with Illinois. They were ready when they got on the field with Iowa the next week. They were ready when they got on the field with Oregon the week after that. Is this a different Indiana team where I felt like we all dismissed the idea of this being competitive last year? And we were right to do so. Are you as quick to do so based on what you've seen from Indiana this year, basically, because it does seem like they've kind of learned from what they lost last year?
You can't be dismissive of them at all. The Oregon game changed a lot in my eyes, I think, for Indiana and for like the general public viewing Indiana, right? Like you mentioned it. I think you have to extend it a little bit more than just those 2 games last year. I think they played Michigan the game before. I think they had Michigan bye week, Ohio State, if memory serves, going into last year, and Michigan kind of beat them up a little bit. Indiana left that game with some injuries. I don't think they won the line of scrimmage. There were some not great signs from that game. You have a bye week, you play Ohio State, you score on the first drive, and then it kind of just goes downhill. You allow 5 sacks. Caleb Downs returns a punt. I think Indiana got shook. Then they go beat Purdue. They beat the snot out of them. It was like 66-0. And then I think the same thing happened at Notre Dame where, you have a nice start and then something bad happens.
Jeremiah Love 98-yard touchdown, and that's kind of
then you get shook. I view that as very much like the Caleb Downs punt return. Mm-hmm. Like, both of those moments were like, oh, we're not built for this. The Oregon game this year, I think Indiana has, I'm not saying they didn't go into those games with confidence, but I think Indiana went into that Oregon game with the confidence of, we're better than these guys. Like, we can beat these guys, and we are going to beat these guys. And there was some, I believe national reporter who was like, there were Indiana coaches who were looking at me before the game like, you laugh, but watch, we're going to beat these guys to the line of scrimmage. And they did. And they beat Oregon at the line. Like, this is a team that went 13-0 last year, won the Big Ten, made it to the Rose Bowl. I understand they got destroyed by Ohio State, but, like, that was still a very good football team last year. And they ran a decent amount back. They still have a lot of talent on that team. And Indiana controlled that game and maybe should have won by more than they did. So you cannot dismiss Indiana at all this year. I think, Indiana has definitely learned some things. I think they're better too. Like I didn't get a chance to ask Ryan Day this too, but like they allowed 5 sacks last year, and it just looked like that offensive line was in shambles when they played Ohio State's defense. I do not think that is the case anymore. They made some transfer portal additions. And Mahalski, by the way, name to remember from Ohio State, is on Indiana's roster. He's not, a big contributor on that line, but they did make a lot of offensive line additions. I think they were necessary, so you can't dismiss them. I think their quarterback is better. Surratt, Pons, I think they're better. Like, this is a better Indiana football team than was a year ago. If I could make just one 30-second point, that aside from that, Ryan Day talked about the Heisman Trophy real quick, and I just
no, you get one takeaway.
I'm going to make another takeaway.
No, because then you're going to take somebody else's takeaway to make your takeaway.
Well, I don't think we're going to have the same takeaway, but go ahead.
I'm literally going to talk about the Heisman Trophy.
Okay, well, go ahead.
What's your takeaway, man?
They should do it like hockey. You have a Heisman Trophy at the end of the regular season. Hockey does the Hart Trophy. You have the end of the regular season.
So, every professional sports team
and
ever?
And then you have a postseason trophy. I don't know why this has to be so difficult, but Ryan Day kind of just said, some are saying that we should push the Heisman Trophy, or maybe there's a thought that we could push the Heisman Trophy at the end of the season. No, that's wrong. You should have the Heisman Trophy as is after the conference championship games, the week after, and then you just have a playoff trophy. You have a playoff MVP. It's the Conn Smythe of the NHL. It's the postseason MVP of the NFL. It's the same thing. Do that. Please just do that.
The bowl games are what ruined that, because the Cotton Bowl needed an offensive and defensive MVP. The Rose Bowl needed its offensive and defensive MVP. Until the bowl alliances don't exist in college football, then you're not. It's also why the college football season ends in late January, because the Rose Bowl has to be in January 1st.
I think the Rose Bowl should just be the national championship game every year.
Or just move the Rose Bowl.
Money. None of these things are changing. To wrap up the initial point, that's such a profound take. Do the thing that every professional league in America already does.
But somehow it's so hard for this sport.
I mean, they just started paying the players 4 years ago, and they didn't even do that the right way. So
Lane Kiffin just left, so this sport, nothing makes sense.
Yeah, that's just where we are with this sport. To wrap up, I don't know if it's going to change how I view what the scores of this game is going to be, but it does change the tenor of how I'm going to talk about it this year. The fact that it does seem like Indiana is a little bit more ready for mentally. Forget, they're a good football team, but mentally they think they belong on this field now. And I think it could end up being 38-15 all over again, but it's not going to feel like it was 38-15 and Indiana had one bad thing happen to them and they just tucked tail. It's almost, to a lesser extent, like how Ohio State and the Michigan thing, where it was okay, what happens when you make a mistake? Does everybody start to, kind of quiver a little bit, or do you move on from that? Okay, Ohio State made 2 mistakes in the span of 20 minutes of real, earth time, right? They allowed Jordan Marshall to break off a 36-yard run, and then they also get Julian Sayin's second throw of the game was an interception, and they overcame that, and they still dominate the rest of the game. It's flipped now. It's okay, Indiana, if JJ catches a 40-yard bomb, are you going to start to quiver a little bit, or do you go, no, we can stick in with these guys. We deserve to be on the field with these guys. My thing, very quickly, is just it's the Heisman thing, but it's not a Heisman thing because it's not that Heisman thing. It's just more about Julian Sayin's arm as his superpower, but Ryan Day seems to be completely enamored with any time Julian Sayin takes off for a run. There have been multiple times this year where he takes off for a run, and it seems like that is when Day is most excited, because it goes back to how Ryan Day has continued to talk about Julian Sayin, and it's do whatever it takes to win the football game. If that means throwing it 40 times, that means throwing it 40 times. If it means running it 60 times, it means running it 60 times in this game. And I felt like that play, along with the 20-play drive, I just thought that was such an important moment of the game where it's not just about Julian Sayin identifying what needs to happen there. It's, putting this you-know-what and his you-know-what and going and getting the yards, because those are the plays that end up deciding those types of games. And it's not going to be the last time, now that he's in matchup games going forward, that he's going to have to decide a game. And I don't know if they were putting him in position to do that against Texas, because they didn't need him to do it against Texas. They're going to need him to do that. And that's what I was talking about last week when I said Julian Sayin is going to have a moment. That was his moment. Right, the 50-yard pass is great, right? The throw to Jeremiah Smith is great. The touchdown pass to Brandon Ennis is great. Ohio State having a 20-play drive is great. But Julian Sayin taking a moment where, quite frankly, Michigan did everything right. They had everybody covered downfield. They sent a blitz. That should have been the end of it. And Julian Sayin goes, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go get 9 yards and get a touchdown. Those are the types of plays that are the difference between winning a national championship, winning a Big Ten championship game, or falling short, or losing in the semifinal of a Fiesta Bowl because Julian Sayin did or didn't make those types of plays. Those are just as important as it is when he's sitting back in a clean pocket and finding these wide receivers who are open. And Ryan Day said it again. He said it on Sunday and he said it on Tuesday that those guys came out as good as they could have planned them to take. So, I mean, they're going to be, if they were 40% healthy against Michigan, they're going to probably be 60% against Indiana, and then they got 30 days. And they'll probably be back to as close as 100% as you can play after you've played 13 regular season games. Get the text 614-350-3315. It's a 2-week free trial, $3.99. After that, Ohio State, Indiana on Saturday. Night game on Fox. The noon games are done. No more noon games. Because even, like, that game starts at 1 at the Rose Bowl. So technically, no more noon games for Ohio State, man.
Ohio State will not run out onto the field in the AM hour ever again in 2025.
Well, no, they'll be in, like, warm-ups. We'll be in the AM.
Maybe.
I mean, we're still going to get there, like, 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that.
Matter.
It doesn't matter. We're going to be there covering the football game. 614-350-3315. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. And go listen to Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts. Steve and Stefan, Andrew. See you later.